We can feel at peace even when the world feels like it's anything but peaceful. And if we honor that feeling and we approach the world that way, we approach our business that way, our career that way, our friendships that way, social media that way, it can start to feel like, okay, I can accept the hard because now I'm in this feeling of peace and relaxation. And I know what brings me back home to feel like I'm sitting on that, next to that fire and feeling at ease.
Welcome to the New World Normal podcast. I'm Debbie Harrell, your host, and twice a month I'm speaking with some amazing humans who are disrupting norms and working to create a more inclusive and holistic society. These people are using their sphere of influence, no matter how large or small, to positively impact the world around them. They'll be sharing their expertise as well as sharing stories of resiliency and hope. We'll be talking about the issues that are affecting us all, from the environment, human rights, social issues, criminal justice, and education. We'll talk about our healthcare systems, wellness, and food, from how it's cultivated and distributed to how it's prepared and consumed. Basically, we're going to talk about all the systems in our society that aren't necessarily working for the benefit of the many. We'll strategize and collaborate on how we as a collective can intentionally make better choices every day that will lead to a positive change in the world around us. Because in the end, it's up to us to solve these problems. There is no magic potion or magic wand. It is us and our daily choices and how we spend our time and how we invest our resources. Intrigued? Stick around and have a listen, and by all means, click like or subscribe on your favorite podcast source. Hello and welcome back to the New World Normal podcast. I'm Debbie Harrell, and today I'm super excited to talk to another business coach. A little mini series we've done here. Today I'm talking to Kimberly Crossland, who is the founder of Roadpreneur and Cruisin and Campfires, which are two companies designed to keep families together and living in freedom through traveling and entrepreneurship. The goal of both of the businesses is to inspire meaningful change through the power of strategic, thoughtful approach to life and business. And in her free time, you can find her looking for new adventure together with her two boys. And I am really excited to dive into her story of how she found this path, and I think I can guess what her why is, but I really hope you enjoy this conversation and find some inspiration. Hello, Kimberly. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. Welcome to the New World Normal podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I know as we talked back and forth before this that I didn't really think that I would have business coaches on the New World Normal podcast, but then the Great Resignation, and every day we're hearing more and more employees standing up and trying to form unions because they're just tired of trying to fit themselves in little boxes and not being paid accordingly. And so the idea of entrepreneurship just is so empowering, I feel, for people today. So yeah, why not talk to some business coaches who are helping people do that? And in such unique ways. Like, I love your program and how you're trying to help people develop business and freedom. But I think it would be fun to start to hear how you got there. What led you to, I think you said you had a cushy consulting job right before you made this change. So what was that all about? What was that like?
Yeah. So I actually, let's go back even further before that. I started my career. I started my career over in Denmark. And so I say that, and I think that's important because the way they approach business and vacation and time away and that work-life balance is so different than what we experience over here in the United States. And so when I started my career there, fresh out of college, fresh out of being able to pick my own schedule and, not have to show up at a certain time, I didn't really have any meetings besides the classes. And so I really dove right into this world of flexibility. And when I worked over there for, I want to say 2-3 years, I'm not sure. Regardless, I was there for a little while, long enough that I was able to absorb that this is what normal is, and this is how working should be. And then even when I moved back stateside, I'm originally from Arizona, moved back to my hometown in Arizona, and I knew that I wanted that same flexibility. Well, what happened was a Danish firm ended up picking me up, and because obviously I speak the language and I know their culture, so I know how to work with them, but they want to get into the American market. So there was a nice harmonious balance there. And so again, I felt like I was going to be able to have that work-life balance, but having that time change all of a sudden I was getting phone calls at 4 o'clock in the morning because I didn't realize that it was 4 o'clock in the morning my time. It was the afternoon their time. So I realized that balance was not quite what I thought it was going to be. And I decided, you know what, it's time for me to shift. And I wanted to meet new people. I wanted to not just be holed up in my apartment. I wanted to have a social life beyond, just having moved back. Nobody that I knew was in town anymore. And so it felt like I was starting from scratch. I had some personal things too behind the scenes that also had me feeling like I was starting everything from scratch. And I was about 25, 26 at the time. And I felt like it was just time for that fresh start. And so what I did was I ended up leaving that job and I went into what you're supposed to go into, you're quote unquote supposed to go into. And I did the long hours, 60+ hour work weeks. I had some flexibility in my schedule just because I was working at an airport at the time. And so they're more around the clock. And so sometimes I had to be there till midnight, which meant I had my mornings free, which is nice, but it still was not where I wanted it to be. I also was starting really from scratch because I had no vacation time all of a sudden. And so I was not able to take any time off. And I thought there has to be a better way. And so this is terrible to admit, but it's the reality. 4 days after I got married and got put on my husband's insurance plan, I quit. And I said, okay.
That is an excellent point, though. The insurance is a lot of times it's a handcuff. Like it keeps you, well, I know for myself as a single mom, it was what kept me in the corporate world. Like I needed the insurance. I needed the steady schedule so that I knew it was predictable. And yeah, it's kind of sad.
It is. It absolutely is. But you know what happened after that actually kind of also shines a light on how handcuffed we are, not only to our personal and our business lives, but just also to the business world and the way things are structured here in the United States. So I ended up going back to the startup world. I was working for a startup firm over in Denmark. I love the startup world. I just feel like you're not bound by all this red tape and all this hierarchy. You can just move and you can do things really quickly and you can experiment. And if things fail, that's okay. And we can talk more about that later. But I went back into the startup world. But the problem with that was they loved me because I did not need to have health insurance. So that was good for them. But apparently, they also believed I did not need a paycheck in a timely manner. So I worked with them for probably about a year. We're still in the investment phase. The product never actually got off the ground. That was for a lot of other reasons. I was there ready to market that product. That's why I was brought in, but we actually never really had a product to market. So there was no launch, there was no nothing, but I was working behind the scenes to help them get that product right. And then it just didn't hit the ground running. But what happened was one Friday evening, my boss at the time walked into my office and very flippantly just said, hey, by the way, on his way out the door, hey, by the way, I can't pay you today because you have a husband who supports you. I'm single. So I'm going to take that money, or we don't have as much investor money. So I'm going to take the investor money. I'll pay you when we get more investor money next week. And I thought, that's not what I thought I was going to be getting into. I showed up.
I like a flexible schedule, not flexible finances.
Right. Exactly. And I mean, yes, there was some truth to it, but I felt like my value is being very much undermined. And I realized, this is not for me. And so what happened was, because the investor funds were drying up, and the product was so far from being ready to hit the market, I took a step back voluntarily after that comment. And I said, you know what? I will be here if you want to hire me as a contractor, but I am not going to be working in this setting. And we're going to have some very strict boundaries. And I need to be able to go and work with people who are going to want to pay me for the value that I deliver. And it was terrifying, but I ended up sitting at my round oak table. I can still see it. And I was looking out my window and I thought, I don't know what's next. I left my corporate cushy job after getting married. I have a husband who also works a lot of hours and he's very happy in his career. And I said, I don't know what's next for me. And that same day, our next door neighbor invited me out for lunch. And you can call it divine intervention. You can call it divine timing. You can call it coincidence, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. But we went out for lunch and she said, well, tell me what you do. And I said, well, this is what I've done for the companies. I love writing. I've been hired to do a lot of blog posts. I've been hired to do SEO. I know all these different things. She said, why don't you get started on it on your own? And oh, by the way, I have someone who I think would hire you right away. So I said, okay, let's try it out. That was 10 years ago. And here I still am today. And in that time period, we have had two children very close together. And I was able to be home with my kids, continuing to work and make money. Yes, I did take a little bit of a step back. That was mostly by choice, but it's been nice to have that balance and that flexibility. And now I've shifted recently. Actually, before I get into how I've shifted, that's not even like the crux of the story. What part of it was, I got that temptation to go back into the corporate world. And so when my youngest son was about 4 months old, so I had a 2-year-old and a 4-month-old. Actually, my oldest was still 1. I had 2 under 2 for a long time.
Probably seemed like forever.
Yeah, it did. That was a hard season, but it was a beautiful season. Just, a lot of not sleeping. So I got the opportunity to fly up to meet one of my clients who I'd been working with since before I'd had kids at all. And they flew me up to Salt Lake City. I took my 4-month-old and my mom with me, and I have family up in Salt Lake City. And so we were able to go and visit. My mom was able to watch my son, but I was still able to be with him in the evenings. And my husband was able to stay home with my oldest. And during that trip, they said, I know you're probably feeling like you're on the entrepreneurial rat race of like constantly like having to put out content, having to market, having to bring in new clients, not knowing where next month's paycheck is going to come. What if we were able to offer you a steady income? You'd still be a contractor, so you can still be flexible with your hours. And in the moment, that sounded really good. And I loved the company. I still love the company. I still work very closely with them. And so I said, yes. That ended up feeling like I was back to working for somebody else, even though they were enormously empathetic. I cannot say enough good things about them. They were just so flexible. I was on a conference call and I had a baby crying and they were like, no problem, but can you mute yourself? And like just very, very kind and very generous, but it just felt overwhelming to me. And this was all something I was putting on my shoulders. And I think that's something that we don't realize that we do to ourselves. It's a mindset shift that we are in the middle of, especially post-pandemic. But what happened was I just decided I couldn't do it anymore. And so January 2020, I had this kind of out-of-body experience where I said, I don't think I can do this anymore. And I know I'm giving up something so good and I want to be able to work with you, but I cannot give you this many hours anymore. I'm just stressed. I'm hoping my children sleep for the wrong reasons. I hope that they sleep for, the right reasons. It's for their own health and their own well-being. But if I have a meeting, I'm like, no, now you have to get out of my room and you're 1 year old. You don't understand this. That's not fair to you. And it wasn't fair to me as a mom. And I was, again, it was all self-imposed, but got to a point where I had that out-of-body experience and I was like, I can't do it. And I had to say no. So once again, I felt like I had taken a step back. I'd put my entire biz building opportunities on hold, specifically so I could work with them. And it was never a bad thing. I learned so much from them. And I still, like I said, do work with them. But it was like starting from scratch again. And so it's just this constant like roller coaster and wave that I've been on this entrepreneurial journey. It's all been very beautiful. But I mean, your introduction where you said we're leaning into a new normal and the Great Resignation, and we're leaning into how people want to have their freedoms and their flexibilities. That's why unions are starting. That's why all these different things are happening. I don't even know if a union is going to help with that. The Great Resignation, we want to have our own schedule, but it's how we set up our business that will answer that. Because yes, I was still a contractor, but I still felt like I was on someone else's schedule. Mm-hmm. And so often we set up our businesses so it falls in line with all those past norms and all those past traditions and traditional models of how we're supposed to be working and how we have to be showing up in this world. And it doesn't have to be like that anymore. So that's my new direction, is to help people see new ways that you can set up your business, new ways you can set up your life so you can explore and you can breathe and you can have a hot second to yourself and not have to worry about, will my children sleep so I can go on this meeting?
I literally felt my body relax as you were saying that, like the freedom to build your business the way you want to, because everyone's trying to tell you, even on the entrepreneur, you're like, oh, you have to do it this way and you have to do it this way and you have. And I'm just like, but I don't want to do it that way. And, you don't have to. Like, there's a different way for everybody's style. And I feel like that's what a lot of people are waking up to also, is people are starving for authenticity. So showing up who you are and what you have is going to be more attractive than the flashy marketing. I wrote several notes as you were talking. The first thing is kind of off topic, but not really, because I was fascinated that you started in Denmark and got that relationship with your work life balance. And I'm drawn to ask you, how do you say the word? The hygge, is that a Danish word?
Hygge. Yes. Hygge.
Hygge.
Yeah, it's hygge. Mm-hmm.
Because I've always been, every time I look at the book, I'm like, but I know I don't know how to say that word.
Now you do.
Now I do. I've written it down phonetically. So, which is such a beautiful way of being, and it can translate across your entire life, so I think that's lovely that that's where you started, and kind of a bit of foreshadowing to how you took this journey. And I also felt a little bit of your story was like Goldilocks, like, oh no, this is a little bit too structured. This is, a little bit too not structured. And so find that roller coaster you said you were on, it felt a little bit like trying and sampling and experimenting, which is probably why you were really drawn to those startups and that dynamic environment. But also I recognized a lot of healthy boundaries you were setting for yourself and others, which is so important, and how you're drawn to the relationships of probably now with your clients, but how you really loved that company that you worked for and how they treated you so kindly. So you really wanted to work with them. And I feel like that's another thing that's so important nowadays, like building relationships, authentic connections, because we want to collaborate. And when we all rise, everybody rises, I feel like the pure capitalist competitive way of doing things is slowly going away, because it just doesn't work for the greater good and for everybody. Sure, these people are becoming highly successful, but what about all these other people? How can we all work together and build our businesses in ways that we're all going to thrive and, what's the word I'm looking for, prosper in the different ways, and not just monetarily, but I feel like working together in that it takes a village is so much more fulfilling than just the paycheck or just the bottom line. Does any of that resonate with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I firmly believe that we become better people and better employees and better contractors and better entrepreneurs when we allow ourselves to have our own personal boundaries too. So that boundary setting is very important, but we don't often gift that to ourselves. So what we'll often do is say, I'm sleeping with my phone right next to me. I'm awake at 1:00 in the morning. Let me just check my email. Let me go look on social media. How many notifications do I have? I need to remember to respond to that. And suddenly we have this mental tailspin, and we lose our own sleep. Sleep, which is something that I'm so passionate about, we need more of, and I'm really bad at getting it, but I'm dedicated to trying to get it. And so I will still find myself consciously, even last night, I woke up, in the middle of the night, as we do sometimes. And I was like, I'm curious. I want to go check my email. I want to go check this and this and this. And I intentionally had to stop myself and say, that's not fair to you and your health. When I was going through that moment of, I can't do this anymore. I remember it was New Year's Eve. I was sitting just, we think about the year ahead. That's what you do on New Year's Eve, right? You're planning, you're setting resolutions. That's the traditional way of thinking about it anyway. And I've been having a physical reaction to the stress that I didn't even know I was experiencing. My legs were very itchy, but I didn't have a rash or anything like that. There was no rhyme or reason to why I was physically feeling exhausted and almost like I was having hives, but I wasn't having hives. I hope that's not too much information.
Not at all.
But you have to pay attention to it because your body sends you signals. And so when you don't have those healthy boundaries up for yourself, you have to really be in tune, both physically and emotionally, with what's going on, because there's something there. And if you're not in tune with that and you're not saying, what is it that's causing me the stress? Where do I not have my own personal boundaries? What am I doing that's making me feel the most stressed. And so there's a lot of ways that you can work with this. I'm not an official sponsor. This podcast is not sponsored by this company, but there's a journal that I use. Here I'm pulling it up. And every month, the reason why I love it, because it allows you to do things like, I don't know if this is being videoed or not, but there's like pictures you can color and like ways that you can reflect. And it's a journal/planner. And I love, the reason why I bring it up is because I love how it intertwines that work. You're planning out your days and you're planning out your schedule and your meal planning and you're planning out when you have meetings and when your kids have something or other, but you also are reflecting on, okay, how am I feeling? What habits do I have? What habits do I wish I had, but I'm not having? How much water am I drinking? Little things like that add up to the greater good. And they add up to something that just feels so good and allows you to really recognize, okay, this week I was really off. What did I do differently? What's going on? Maybe nothing is going on other than it's a full moon and it feels like the world is just tilted incorrectly. And, I know there's a lot of like magnetism and stuff out there around that I'm not an expert in, so I'm not going to speak to it, but we're all so cyclical. And if we don't allow ourselves the ability to lean in when we want to lean in energetically and take our foot off the gas, and we need to take our foot off the gas for our own emotional energy, we're just doing ourselves a disservice. And that doesn't matter if you have a business or not. It just matters how we approach life.
If you're enjoying this conversation, you'll love the discussions happening in the New World Normal community, where we meet regularly to discuss personal growth and social issues, because we know when we do our work, we're better able to navigate this ever-changing world. Be sure to follow the link in the show notes for more information.
That is so true. And I love that you've said that, especially the connection of the mind and the body, like your physical manifestations of stress. I've actually been in a season of dealing with that myself. So I completely understand and relate to it. And it is real. So, and I tell my friends that are like, oh, I have this, but yeah, it's not that big. I'm like, no, listen now. That's a little squeak. It's going to get bigger if you just ignore it. So that's for everybody out there too. If you're having something minor, it's your body trying to tell you something, and so you should listen. I love that you were talking about journal planner, because I'm actually designing one right now.
There you go.
And because I love the idea of having the planning and the journaling together. Number one, I'd need less notebooks in my life. And the main part of what you were talking about was developing a connection with yourself and knowing when it's time to lean in and when it's time to sit back on those. Because I feel like so many of us for so long have been on the treadmill of go, 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 because we weren't lucky enough to be taught the theory of hygge. Is that right?
Yes. Good job. You got it.
And so we're going on this treadmill and trying to fit ourselves in these little boxes and do all the things we're supposed to do. And it's making us unhappy, and it's making us physically sick a lot of times too, which is kind of what I talked to you about the last business coach. So yeah, the whole time during 2020, when I like to say we were told to go to our rooms and think about what we've done, it really gave us that opportunity to connect with ourselves. And I feel like that's part of the Great Resignation. It's like, I've connected with myself and I've decided that I don't want to do that anymore. And so, yeah, I feel like that is the main part of the main gift of what happened during that time. I know there's lots of tragic and sadness and overwhelm and isolation and economic problems, but I feel that time to sit with ourselves and connect with ourselves was the gift of 2020.
Well, it's almost like a pendulum, right? I mean, we were so far one direction with go, 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 work, 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 60-hour plus work weeks. There's no breaks, no nothing. And then, like you said, I love that. We're told to go to our rooms and relax, reconnect with yourself. Now we can come and be more centered with how we approach everything. So yeah, the isolation is very real. But there's ways to connect with other people outside of, even when you're in business by yourself, for yourself, or if you are working in a company, but you're remote, there's different ways you can still connect with people. And that's that pendulum coming back to center, where we can choose how we show up. So my husband doesn't always like that I do this, but I say yes to a lot of volunteer opportunities because I just enjoy it. And so there's a group that is very near and dear to my heart, and it's other moms who are on this journey with young children, and it has nothing to do with my business. And yet I just like to be with them. I just like to be in community with them. We will share stories. We will play silly little games together. We will cry together. We will laugh together, and we'll have that moment where you can just let the emotional, pressure valve release, and you can let all that steam out, and with people who get it. And so that's my connection point. And then I also like to have these calls. I like social media. I actually really do, because I've learned different ways I can put up the boundaries. Yes, you get this comparison game filtering in sometimes, but I've recognized it in myself when that happens. And I have friends that I can lean on to talk myself down from it sometimes. I think that there is some toxicity, absolutely, on social media. And yet there's also some healthy connection points that brings people together in the time when we really need to be brought together. So it's all about this pendulum coming back to center and figuring out, how do we leverage technology in a way that's going to feel good and right and not cause these mindset hurdles that are absolutely there for all of us? How can we connect with people in person in a way that feels right and healthy and good for us? How can we have broader experiences beyond just a business or just parenthood alone? I'm not built to be a stay-at-home mom, and yet I'm so grateful for being so close to my children. But they're not home right now. They're in school, and I'm very happy because I know that they're happy. And so it's all very good. And it's that healthy balance. It's just all about finding that balance. And that balance is going to look different for everybody. And so going back to your point of what you're creating, which I'm loving and I'm excited to see it, that journaling and that planner together, where you can start to identify these patterns. You can start to see what makes the most sense for you. And then you can lean more into that rather than having to just do what we've always been told we have to do.
I love what you were just talking about, the connecting. What I was hearing was it's about being intentional about how you're connecting. Just like social media, I know that once I started on this entrepreneurial journey, I completely changed the way I was using social media. You get really intentional about, like, I want to make sure my time is being used productive. Well, I don't even like the word productive, but like I'm finding meaning in what I'm interacting with, not just silly cat videos, although silly cat videos have their value as well.
Yes, they do.
But being intentional about not just the way I'm interacting on social media, but who do I want to connect with and spend time with? Like you're saying, looking for volunteer opportunities. Now that I have the freedom of my schedule, maybe I can volunteer more. Maybe I can set lunch dates with people that I know are going to relate to what I'm talking about and want to talk about the important things. Like I find I crave those kind of conversations more these days of like, let's talk about the real stuff. Like, I don't really care what the Kardashians are up to. No judgment to anybody who likes watching the Kardashians. It's good. I know.
I do actually really like reality TV, but just not the Kardashians.
I have a lot of friends who are very, very much like love all the reality TV. And I think just because I don't have television anymore, so I probably would be sucked in by now too. So yeah, but I want to talk about, like, what are you doing? What are you up to? What's lighting you up? What's feeding you? And what do you want to put out in the world? Like, I love having those conversations with people. So it's exciting that now I'm life coaching. So, hey, I can actually do that for a living.
Yeah, I love that. I also think being very intentional to the social media point, with how you're scrolling on social media. And this goes directly to what you were saying about having conversations with people and sitting down and getting a little bit deeper and pulling back those layers. So social media really does not let us do that. We have the Facebook happy. This is what people are putting out. You see all the beautiful vacation photos and, oh, well, why can't I go on a vacation? Why don't I go to Disneyland? Why don't I go here, here, here? And we kind of get sucked down that rabbit hole. Or you see these accomplishments. And yes, we all rise by lifting each other. And yes, we all rise together by linking arms. And yet it's easy and normal human behavior to get caught up and say, well, why don't I have that? When is it my turn? And when you're being very intentional with how you use social media, one thing you need to remember that has helped me, that people can remember, is that nobody is an overnight success. Everybody has their back stories, back failures. Everyone has their struggles. So within my community that I run, and the reason why, by the way, I wanted to run a community was a lot for the same thing. So we can have those intentional conversations. We can be very transparent and authentic with how we're showing up in the world and have a safe space to land with people who get it and they're on that same journey, who are not going to be judgmental. I think we all need to find that community, business or personal, it doesn't matter. We all need to have that safe space to land, because when you do get caught up in that social media feed, when you're scrolling and you start to say, but when is it my turn? When am I going to do this? Why have I not done this yet? What am I doing wrong? What's wrong with me? That's where that mental spiral can lead to. We need someone to say, nothing's wrong with you. You don't know their story. And let's dissect their story a little bit. Let's sit across the table over coffee, have that conversation about what's really going on. Because what you're not seeing behind the scenes is they're deeply unhappy over here. And do you really want that for yourself? Probably not. Or let's really look at that conversion rate. How many hundreds of thousands of dollars did they spend? And was their conversion rate really that good at the end of the day? No. Well, maybe you're actually doing okay. And being able to have someone, hold up that mirror to you and say, don't look at social media for a second. Look at yourself in the mirror and see all the good you're doing. So having a life coach like you is so important. That's why having friends are so important, and the community that gets it is so important. And when we fall into that trap of the social media scroll and that mindless scroll at the end of the day, I'll speak just to myself. I don't want to tell people what they need to do. I hate the word should and need to, but here I'm saying it. But I need to oftentimes come back to center, let that pendulum land and say, no, I'm on the right track. I know what I need to do. I know my convictions. I know my values. I know what I want for myself, what I want for my family. I'm on the right track. I'm actually doing okay. Even though I don't have that Disneyland trip tomorrow, maybe it's going to be in a few years instead. Doesn't matter. I'm happy. Here's what I'm happy for. Maybe have a gratitude journal alongside your planner, things like that. Just being able to remind yourself that life is not that bad. We're actually going to be doing okay. It's all right. And you can breathe that sigh of relief when you do get that more intentional mindset about what you're engaging with and how you're engaging it.
And when you're intentional about that gratitude, it just builds more abundance, because you realize oh yeah, I really do have a lot to be grateful for. And why am I comparing myself to this person that I really don't know the full story of this person? Like, I only see what's being presented to me. So it is a slippery slope that we all tend to, I will speak for myself also, can go down that rabbit hole. I love that we kind of segued organically towards your community. And what are you doing in your community?
Thank you for asking.
Tell me about your community.
So like I had said, it really meant a lot to me to have a community. There's a lot of different business models that are out there that work for people in a variety of different ways. But as I talked about in the beginning, it's important to me that I have a business model that will align with my lifestyle. So my lifestyle is family first, and I'll never be apologetic for that. I know, in fact, I hope to model it for other moms to feel like they can have permission to both work and have family, or anybody who just wants to have that freedom to explore, but then still feel that purposeful, they're giving back in some way. It doesn't matter if it's a business or volunteer or whatever it is, but just feeling like you have that sense of purpose with how you show up. There's no right or wrong way to do that. So for me, the reason why I chose a community is because I like to be around people, but I cannot always be in person. I like to connect with people. I like to hear people's stories. I like you were saying, I like to peel back the layers and go deeper. And so to me, this was a way that I would not just create a course and say, good luck, have fun, high five, I hope this works out for you. I didn't want that. I wanted to be there on the journey because I like to celebrate the wins, and I like to be that person who will lift them up when there are down moments, because there's always down moments. We all have them. It's natural. It's human. And so I built this community where when you sign up, you have a 5-step framework for how to start a business. And then I also offer the ease and the support of my marketing experience through a marketing calendar, my copywriting experience through copywriting templates and things like that. And the whole goal of it is just to make life feel easier and more seamless. So you're not feeling like you have to do all the things and juggle all the things. I am terrible at tech. That's the first person I'm hiring when I am hiring, and I'm about to do that, is someone to help me with the tech, because I know my weaknesses and we all have them. And so being able to have that community of, this is a team effort, even if we're on our own trajectory, we're still linking arms. We're still rising by lifting others and moving on this journey together that we've chosen to show up for. So if someone is wanting to do the great resignation and say, I can't do that anymore, I cannot do the corporate world anymore, I cannot do even the remote working world anymore, because I want to have the freedom to, when I feel like I cannot think today, I want to be able to go and ride my bike. I'm a big mountain biker. I like to go mountain biking. I want to go hit the trail. I want to just go put my tires on dirt and clear my head for a little bit and then come back. And oftentimes I'll be much more clear headed and I can approach things differently.
I feel like I want to stop you right there for a second, because I feel like that is a huge point. And I think that bosses, CEOs of regular jobs should be listening, because there's times when I know I sit down on my desk and I am just not feeling it. Like I'm super distracted. And I know, because I have the freedom to get up and go do something else, whether I go take a walk or sit in my backyard with my dogs or whatever I do, then I can come back when I'm feeling more in flow or feeling more inspired or feeling more focused, whatever it is that's the issue. Whereas if I was at my old job, I would sit at my desk and be distracted and collect the paycheck, but really not be getting anything done.
Exactly.
Which then it's like bosses are like, well, you didn't get anything done. I'm like, yeah, because my like just not working. Like, so mental health days like should be given out. Like you're going to be, if you're more flexible with your employees, I feel like you're going to get better work.
Right. I mean, and who says we can't work on Saturdays and Sundays? Who says? If I'm feeling like I am inspired and I want to, I have this on my mind and I just want to get it out in the form of a blog post or a podcast, why can't I pick up the microphone and do that? And why shouldn't that count towards my working hours if I'm in the corporate job, And I'm thankful for this client that I did talk about earlier. They were all on board with it. And there are times when we'll be voxing, which is Voxer is like a walkie-talkie app where you can go back and forth on a Saturday evening. And it's all by choice. If I chose not to vox back until Monday, that would also be okay. And they're really big on the experience, on the employee experience side of things. So that's why it's important. They understand it and they get it, which is why I really still love working with them. In Denmark, what we had in the office was we had a personal chef, which is so luxurious. I feel like I miss that. But they did it. They brought in a chef. So you didn't even have to worry about packing your lunch. You don't have to worry about what you're going to eat.
Well, and that's so huge, because the mind-body connection of like, if I am being nourished and fed this healthy food, rather than grabbing chips out of the vending machine because I forgot to pack something and I'm really hungry, like I'm going to be more focused. And
exactly.
It makes so much sense.
It does. And then they also had like a ping pong table. So if you had a moment where you're like, I can't sit, I want to stand, they bought everybody standing desks before that was like a thing. And that's the whole Danish mindset. So I want to only halfway quote because I don't have it memorized, but there's a book, and I think it's the one that you're talking about, called The Little Book of Hygge. And it's all about, so in the introduction, they have a story about a group of people who are sitting in this beautiful cabin. There's a fire burning. They're sipping their hot chocolate or their tea or their coffee, whatever warm beverage that's going to warm you from the inside. You fill in that gap, whatever works for you. But they're all sitting around and someone says, isn't this so hyggelig, which is like the other term for hygge. I'm trying to like translate it into English and it's not doing a good job. But isn't it that evoking that feeling of coziness? Because that's the best translation for it. A feeling of coziness and just calm and relaxation together with friends. And someone said, yes, but only if there was a storm raging outside. And it's almost like that feeling of coziness, that feeling of calm and relaxation. You have to honor that there's also a lot going on. There's a lot going on in the world. We're not going to ever get away from that. Sadly, we've just come out of a pandemic. We're now in what feels almost like World War III, even though it's not technically that, but there's a lot of hardship out there. And so being able to, and we have that in our lives too. I mean, personally, people go through things. People go through very hard things with family, with friends, with ourselves, our own mental health. We need to be able to honor that we can feel at peace even when the world feels like it's anything but peaceful. And if we honor that feeling and we approach the world that way, we approach our business that way, our career that way, our friendships that way, social media that way, it can start to feel like, okay, I can accept the hard because now I'm in this feeling of peace and relaxation. And I know what brings me back home to feel like I'm sitting on that, next to that fire and feeling at ease.
That I love that, the picture, the analogy, the feeling of like, finding that calm in the midst of this storm. That is the world we live in. which is pretty much what we're trying to do in the New World Normal community, is that taking care of ourselves to navigate the world that we live in so we can better interact with other people. And so, yeah, community is huge for my mission as well. And my favorite thing about your community and the way you're helping entrepreneurs is that it's not a traditional business model. You're helping people build businesses on the road or without like a brick and mortar, like a not location required.
Yeah, location independent.
There's the word I'm looking for. I'm like, I did not have my coffee yet. I was like,
that's okay.
Maybe you're taking a chance having an interview when your brain has not been switched on yet. Yes, location independent. And speaking of freedom, that's just a whole nother level of freedom. What sorts of things are your clients building? And if you could share any of that or like anything that has really inspired you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're not going to totally shift from the traditional business models. Like there's not some huge upheaval of that. It's subtle shifts in how we approach those business models. So inside our community, it's called Roadpreneur because it's made for RVers, and yet it's also made for people who just want to seek adventure and have more freedom and flexibility to go hiking, go embrace nature, go be outside, or go work without any internet access for a month, which we have a member doing. It's all designed to set up your business for that ease and that flow and just being able to experience life. I have a backstory to why this is so important to me. And growing up, I had someone who was like a secondary mom. I'm very, very close with my mom. So she was just kind of like a bonus mom figure. It was my best friend's mom. And we were both only children. So we called each other sisters. And she just became a hugely influential in my life as well. She lived very close. So I had a lot of sleepovers with her, that kind of a thing. She was part Canadian, part American. She has Canadian citizenship and a green card for a living, but she lived and worked in the United States. So, call it what you want, but she lived in both places. So summers were in Canada and the rest of the year was here in Tucson. And she had this big goal of when she retired, she's going to start a bookstore up in Vancouver, which is where she was from. Well, obviously she did not make it to retirement. She got cancer and succumbed to cancer. So to me, those retirement plans and waiting till tomorrow to experience life and to live a life that you really want to live, we can't wait. You don't know that tomorrow's guaranteed, as cliche as that sounds. It's so true.
It is true.
And so being able to embrace today for today and experience and travel and see the world and, not mind being out in the wind sometimes, back to my Scandinavian roots, we have an expression, there's no such thing as bad weather. And I'll tell you today, we're very gusty here in Vail, Arizona, where I live. And so being able to just embrace it all, good and bad, and just experience. I think it's just experiencing everything. So back to my Roadpreneur community, which is your question, I started it to help people have more of those experiences, no matter how it fleshes out. We talk a lot about RVing because that's, to me, one of the best ways to experience. I obviously love international travel. I've lived and traveled abroad more than lots of times. I grew up traveling abroad. I also lived in London for a while. And so I've had a lot of experiences overseas in different cultures. And I think it's so, so important to experience all the different cultures, whether it's a mountain town versus rural town, or it's going overseas and really, having a meal with the Masai Mara, which I've done. It doesn't matter how you're experiencing those different cultures, as long as you are with that open, very intentional mind, you're going to soak up that experience, every experience you get. And so in Roadpreneur, what I teach is how to set your business up for that. So we have product-based businesses that are in there, but if you're on a shipping schedule, you feel tethered to your warehouse, to your office, whatever it is, wherever you're shipping from. And so what we'll do is we'll tweak that model. How can you set those expectations for yourself? What do you want for yourself? I always start with not the employee, although you are the employee, but your own experience that you want first. And then what do your customers need? And where's that middle ground that you can meet them? And you can set those very clear expectations, set up those boundaries so you're not pulled into this, because it'll happen very subtly. You're not pulled back into that constantly always on hamster wheel type approach to running a business or working in the corporate world. How can you build in that breathing room for yourself? And so one way to do it for a product-based business, and I say product-based because it feels like the most tethered to a location, is you can have a subscription box where you only ship one day a month. And you can plan it. Your customers can plan it. It's now predictable. What else can you do that makes it really predictable? Well, you can have limited time releases. For example, my husband loves this company that creates athletic shorts. And when it's release day, they sell out in about 10 minutes, and but then they also know they've got very loyal fans. They can build the buzz right before the release of these, but they're only shipping one time. They know their inventory. They know what they have on hand. So they're not constantly having to ship the boxes. Everything is already there. They just have to slap those labels on the boxes. We also have course creators who are ready to kind of get off that crazy, like up and down roller coaster of, am I going to sell something this month or am I not? So then we introduce a membership model where you have that recurring revenue that you can count on. Yes, also by all means, still have courses, but have your baseline where you know you're going to be okay. And you don't have to have this feast or famine approach. Freelancers who are service providers who are constantly on the hook for showing up for their customers on a certain timetable. How can we shift that? How can we help you serve people in the way that you want to serve them, but not have it be where you are always on their schedule and having to be on, rushing off the trail to go to a Zoom call, that kind of a thing, So it's just those subtle tweaks, but it's all about understanding yourself and understanding what your customer needs and where can you meet them in the middle? Because there's a huge middle ground that I just don't think we allow ourselves to see because we're so stuck in the traditional molds. And that's okay. But there's different ways that we can also break away from those and like you like to say, define your new normal and to create a new normal.
Yes. Question the old normals and like, was that really working? Why are we doing it this way? Yes. Disrupt normal, which leads me to my final question. Because initially when I started, it was about normalizing, but then I started to feel like, well, normal is kind of exclusive, like you're either normal, you're not normal. And the reality is like, what is normal? It's all social construct. So if there was any social normal that you could disrupt and be done with, what might that be?
Oh gosh, what a good question. I would say the way that we work and the way we treat ourselves through our work. We need to disrupt the idea that we do not have personal boundaries because we absolutely do. And I'm a firm believer that we need to be advocates for those personal boundaries for ourselves. And that takes a lot of intention, like we've talked about today. It takes that constant reminder. It takes journaling. It takes planning in a way so that you can put up your own personal boundaries and say, I'm not adding more to my plate today. I will get enough done. And also, I guess a secondary part of this would be that concept of what is enough. What is enough? And so, I think that we are often sucked into that. I'm not doing enough. I'm not there enough. I'm not showing up enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not a good enough cook. I'm not a good enough, crafter. I'm not good enough at technology. Forget it. Forget it because you are enough. And so you talked about gratitude journaling. We can also talk about our own journaling of what we're doing so well and start remembering that. Be grateful for not just all that we have, but all that we're doing. And we can kind of shine a light on, I'm doing enough and I'm more than enough. And this life is more than enough. And we've been gifted so much. I don't like the victim mentality and it's easy to fall into it. I know I've been in it. And so it's not a criticism, but we have to be able to pull ourselves out of feeling like we don't have enough, we're not doing enough, and return to, I'm very blessed. I'm very lucky. And I've got so much going for me. And I think the people that emulate this the best actually are the ones who've been through the biggest hardships because they've truly seen the other side of what is very difficult. You can hear a lot of different stories out there of people who've been through some very significant hardships in their life and how they've emerged from it. And we can find hope in that. And we can find joy in that and gratitude in that.
I love all of that. I love the talking about how boundaries have come up again. It's setting them it's important for you It's important for your health. It's important on so many levels, that boundary, and that coming through an adversity, the other side, and being a better or somehow more resilient. One thing that we talk a lot about, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Yes. And that's, I think, because we live in a traumatic world. I mean, there's no way around it. It is. I think people are experiencing trauma on a daily basis, whether they're recognizing it or not is another thing. But more and more people are having issues with PTSD. But what we don't talk as much about is the post-traumatic growth. That when you take the time to do the work on those issues and work through whatever happened, you come out the other side with an inner strength and a knowing that, okay, like I now have tools that when things go wrong, I can self-regulate and I can get myself back to that center of that pendulum. And I seriously think, I feel like I could just talk to you forever about business, about life, about travel, but we are to the end of our time. So thank you so much for talking with me today. It was really nice.
Thanks for having me on. It was nice. Thank you.
I wish you much success because I think what you're doing is awesome.
Thank you.
I seriously could have talked to Kimberly all day. So fun. Lots of great information. We could have talked about life, travel, business. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I hope if you are thinking about starting a business or want more freedom in your professional career, you can be inspired by some of the strategies we talked about, boundary setting, connecting with yourself. And please go check out all of her offerings and her links, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to our show. If you enjoyed what you heard, feel free to subscribe and leave us a review. If you didn't enjoy what you heard, reach out to us and let us know how we can make it better. This show really is about all of us, not just me and my guests, but how we can all work together to make the world just a little bit better. And if you'd like to connect with us in other ways, be sure to follow us on Instagram. We also have a free Facebook group where our fans of the show can connect and discuss their favorite episodes. And in addition to that, we have a membership platform, The Collective by New World Normal, where you will participate in monthly workshops, pop-up challenges, and weekly meetings to support a more intentional lifestyle. We have meaningful conversations about important topics, all in a space that is safe, supportive, and encouraging. So join us. And if you'd like to show us some more support, check out our intentional apparel shop online, New World Intentions. You'll find t-shirts, hats, totes, all with positive messaging to help you move more mindfully through your day and help you to create that new world normal. You can also check out our affiliate page where you'll find our favorite eco-friendly household and personal care products. Thanks again for listening.